departments and agencies are restricted to essential functions while appropriations have lapsed. Congress's failure to do our work, in my view, is inexcusable. We've got to come together, which means we've got to talk to one another, and it can't be about who's winning, who's losing, because right now those that are losing are the American people, including the first Americans across the country. So today we're going to hear about how government shutdowns and agency reductions in force impact Native communities. When federal employees are furloughed, the people responsible for carrying out the government's trust and treaty obligations are unable to do their jobs. This disrupts Native communities' access to essential federal resources and services. Tribes and Native leaders are reaching out for help, and they're being told, well, can't help you now, the government is not open. And all the while, Native parents who rely on SNAP are worrying about how to feed their families. Head Start renewal deadlines are approaching with no one to process them. Maintenance and repairs at healthcare facilities are stalled, and tribal governments are dipping into their limited savings if they haven't used them up already. We know how past government shutdowns have hurt Native communities. During the 2018 partial government shutdown, the Indian Health Service had no advance appropriations at the time, forcing tribes and tribal organizations to cut services, exhaust on-hand medical supplies, and even consider temporarily closing tribe healthcare facilities. So funding for IHS isn't a luxury. I think we know well, for many, it is a matter of life and death. And that's why back in 2013, we were able to introduce legislation to provide advance appropriations for IHS. We knew then it was going to be a long haul, but it was the right thing to do. And in the FY23 appropriations bill, we finally secured advanced appropriations for most of the IHS accounts. So today, as healthcare facilities across the country continue operating with minimal disruption during the shutdown, I think we can see the real impact that that had. In 2025, we've also seen reductions in force, the RIFs, across many departments and agencies, affecting the administration of federal programs that Native communities rely on. The loss of employees with deep institutional knowledge and longstanding relationships with Native communities weakens the effectiveness of these crucial federal programs. On October 10th, additional RIF notices were issued. We're going to hear today about the impacts at the CDFI fund, which supports Native CDFIs in expanding economic opportunities in Indian country, at the Office of Indian Education and the Impact Aid Office, where cuts threaten education opportunities for Native students, and at HHS, where staff reductions to SAMHSA, HRSA, home programs that fill gaps left by IHS, especially when it comes to behavioral health. Now, not all of these offices have Indian or tribe in their names, but each plays a critical role in serving Native communities, and all are part of carrying out the federal government's trust and treaty responsibilities. I've consistently reminded agencies of the unique government-to-government relationship and that these obligations must be upheld, even in times of challenge. So, well, it must kind of a meeting under perhaps not the best circumstances right now. I do hope that today's hearing will be a productive one. We all want our government to work. We want our government to serve all the people of the United States, including our Native peoples. And as senators, I think it's our responsibility to listen and understand the day-to-day impacts that communities are facing during this shutdown, and that's what we intend to do here today. I'll now turn to the Vice Chair for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chair Murkowski, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. When the federal government shuts down, our trust and treaty and legal obligations do not vanish, but they are put at risk. Promises to provide health care, housing, education, and public safety, among so many other critical services, are all on the chopping block. Communities are scrambling to secure alternate or reserve funding just in case their federal funds fall through, and several tribes have already declared states of emergency due to the funding and service shortfalls. And it's not the first time. In 2018, we learned just how devastating a government shutdown is for Native communities. A few examples: general assistance payments for food, clothing, shelter, and utility needs of low-income Native individuals and families were suspended. Funding for foster care and long-term care for children and elders suspended. Funds for tribal operations suspended. During that shutdown, the president of the National Congress of American Indians, Jefferson Keel, warned us that, quote, Indian country cannot afford and America should not stand for another one. But here we are again. We're on day 29 of this government shutdown, on track to being the longest on record, and that is nothing to brag about, especially because it's no ordinary shutdown. This time, it's also on track to being the most damaging to federal workers. Rifts are happening right now across the federal government that are choking off funds and services promised to Native communities. As we speak, the Office of Indian Education staff at the Department of Education are receiving their RIF notices. Without these federal workers, Native education programs required by law could grind to a halt. It doesn't have to be this way. Punishing federal workers with pink slips is a choice. It is not a requirement under the Anti-Deficiency Act. It is not something that automatically occurs at the end of the federal fiscal year. This is a choice that has nothing to do with the fact that we are in a shutdown. This shutdown is robbing agencies of staff needed to carry out the trust obligations to American Indians, Native Hawaiians, and Alaska Natives. Native communities can't put federal funding to work or fully exercise their self-determination if their fiduciary, the United States government, is out of the office. Let me be clear what we're talking about here. Native programs are not DEI spending. They are not charity. They are the law. Attempting to cancel funds for Native programs, riffing more than 4,200 federal employees, and eliminating tribal consultation policies, that's not the United States government meeting its trust and legal obligations. It's this administration's attempt to resuscitate failed policies of termination. I look forward to this hearing and this discussion about how this is impacting Indian country and Alaska Natives and Native Hawaiians, and I thank you again for being willing to testify.
Thank you to our Vice Chair. We'll now turn to our witnesses. We have today the Honorable Vice Chairwoman Sarah Harris, who is the Secretary for United South and Eastern Tribes. She will be followed by Mr. Ben Mallott, who is the President of the Alaska Federation of Natives. Mr. Kerry Bird, who is the Board President for the National Indian Education Association. Mr. Pete Upton, who is the CEO of the Native CDFI Network. And Mr. A.C. Locklear, who is the CEO of the National Indian Health Board. I want to thank you all for taking the time to be before the committee today. I want to single out my friend Ben Mallott, who has had a very busy week up in Alaska, actually busy weeks. We had a major disaster in western Alaska during this shutdown. I also want to recognize Willie Nunn, all of the FEMA personnel who have surged up to the state, working around the clock on recovery operations, and again, all without pay. I'm very, very grateful for their dedication and for all the federal employees who are coordinating with the tribes and the tribal organizations, the state. My team's been in there as we're all working to deliver services to those that have been displaced. So know that we continue to keep our attention there. I want to remind the witnesses that we have your full written testimony. It will be made part of the official record. We'd ask you to keep your oral testimony to no more than 5 minutes so we've got time for questions from members. And I've shared with some of you, we anticipate having a vote here somewhere in the 2:15, 2:30 period. So you'll see movement back and forth, but we're going to try to keep the hearing moving. So let's turn first to Vice Chairwoman Harris with your testimony, please.